Good evening, listeners, and welcome to the Heritage Centre here in Lough Gur. It's the 26th of September 2025, and as I said, we're here in the Heritage Centre in Lough Gur, and we're looking out over the Enchanted Lake. A little breeze today, so small waves, and I can see canoes out in the lake. And of course, on the northern shores, we have the Hollow Hill, the home of the fairies, Fennel. And the far over side, then we have Knockadone. And I'm here this evening with a local man, Claude O'Carroll, and we're just going to have a little chat, maybe about his family, maybe about some of the stories his father used to tell, and things like that. So, Claude, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, John.
Yeah, your family, of course, goes back a good few generations here around Lough Gur. Would you tell us a little about your family and where they came from?
I will for sure. Basically, John, it's both my mother's side and father's side, or lived in Rusheen near the Mass Rock. Of course, my father was born in there, and his father had lived there. My father, John Carew, he had 6 sisters and 1 brother, Tom, who ended up living up near Patrickswell.
That's right. Yeah,
It was a large family, but back then there was a lot of large families. That's just the way it was. So there were 6 sisters. The first one, Peg Deneen, she lived up by Patrickswell. May Hinshy then, who lived in Kilcullen.
That's right. Yeah, I'd forgotten that as well.
There was Nora Roach. She lived in Kilteely. And Agnes Downs, she married a Tom Downs, who was originally from hospital, and they lived in Carradavin, Limerick. There was one other sister then, Kathleen, who was a nun in the Ursuline Convent in Blackrock and Cork. So, large family. That was my father's side. My mother's side then, her mother was Annie Dunn from Bruff, and her mother then was a Sarah Punch, who lived beside the Mass Rock as well. So kind of intertwining somewhat the two families.
Back in those times, there wasn't much travel, so it would be very normal for local families to marry into each other.
That's it too, John. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, my mother came from Thomondgate in Limerick. That Annie Dunn from Bruff emigrated to Chicago and met a man from Clare, Austin P. Hanrahan, and they came back then from Chicago and settled in Thomondgate. And it's just the connection, to Roisin as well, the coincidence, yeah.
And your father, of course, worked in Roadstone, and he probably started his career with him in Knockdirk, would he have had?
Well, he did. He went to school, and he left school when he was 14. And he went working for John Hunt, the archaeologist. And that was the 1930s through to the 1950s. And after that, then there was a John Wesley who lived in a house beside Lough Gur. Alan Bosinger is living there now. That was the house. And my father then went working for Roadstone in Knockdirk. He was a fitter welder. So he started there and moved from there because Roadstone left Knockdirk, went to work in Bunratty. Yeah.
It's interesting there, if I could just go back a little bit. You mentioned that he worked as with the archaeologist. Have you any stories of anything from that time in his life?
Well, basically, of course, there was excavations around the lake. And what my father would do sometimes is he'd have a timber box with a glass panel on the bottom and row out into the lake and put this box down into the water and just looking for artefacts, basically. And as much as it was clear, it was magnifying as well. So there was found a couple of artefacts. All right. John Hunch used to travel the world, basically, and my father would be like a caretaker then when he was gone, just stay in the house and make sure everything was safe and sound.
Yeah.
And that was it, basically, yeah. So that was the 1930s. I went through, he was there with him until the early 50s.
He gave a long time around Lough Gur with him, yeah. And have you any idea what type of artefacts he would have found or where they ended up?
Well, the Hunt Museum is where they ended up. Stone Age axes, and I'm not entirely sure, but there were certainly Stone Age and Bronze Age artifacts, and they're on display inside in the Hunt Museum.
That's really interesting. And I suppose if you went out with a similar apparatus out in the lake, even today you'd find some more artifacts.
You'd think so. Anyway, now it's been checked out so often, I suppose, what's there, but there's always a chance, I suppose.
Yeah, well, probably if you go down in the mud, you'd have to go down in the mud now, yeah. That was very interesting times, and to think that your father was involved in it.
He was involved in that, yeah.
And then, of course, as you said, he moved on to Roadstown. But he was a great man, was he, for stories and the ghost stories?
He was, and he told some stories over the years. Unfortunately, I can't pinpoint dates and years exactly, but he did say himself and his brother Tom, of course, they'd be fishing down here at the lake, and it was in the 1940s that they were both walking out from the lake and just up past the art gallery at the entrance, and they noticed, well, they saw, best described as a ball of fire, and it was following them, and of course the two of them ran as fast as they could, and this thing was rolling after him, and from the start of the lake up to the main road, and then it disappeared. And that's one story he told. He also told a story that happened a couple of times. Of course, when he was growing up, all the neighbours, they would have traditional Irish music in their houses, and they go from house to house at night, a rambling house. And it was afterwards, when the house was gone, some nights if he was walking along the road by Rusheen, by New Church, he'd hear music coming from the house, and the house gone. Right. So that didn't happen too often, but and no houses around where that would be happening. Just little stories like that.
Seeing that you talked, that was coming from his father's house.
From his father's house, yeah.
And when you go down that Borheen and on for the chapel, there's still the gable of a house down there. Was that Punch's or was it Carroll's?
I'm not sure, John. Yeah. I'm not sure.
That's still standing there. And of course, if you continued on in that went right across Rusheen Bog.
And out by Hazes and on to the main road now. Yeah. And
but it came all the way across the bog, and I suppose that might have been a roadway to Ballinlough, to the monastery there, where the nuns were.
Possibly
was the way in there, yeah. No. And to be great to see that developed and as a walkway for people, but
exactly.
Yeah. But whether that'll ever happen or not, I don't know.
Your guess is as good as mine, but it'd be something new. And
had you a story about some hearing knocking on your door when you were younger?
Sometimes. Now, I'd always question, did I actually hear something or not? But yeah, once when I was younger, heard knocking on the door, the back door. Yeah. Now, it only happened once, but yeah, it's something that I'd always remember. Yeah, it was 11 o'clock at night. It was actually in 1994, the summer of 94. And I just heard 3 knocks on the back door. That was it, yeah. And nobody there. So,
because we all hear the stories of if you build or disturb a fairy pet or anything, so you'd often wonder about that, wouldn't you?
You would, and you'd hear the stories, and I suppose it's history as well, and you'd hear these stories from different people in different parts of the country. So you'd always wonder, is there something to it?
And then when you were growing up above in Knockdock yourself and the hill behind you, and we'll say, you lived in Bruff for a long time, did you?
Lived in Bruff. In Bruff as a child and moved down to Patrickswell then in 1993.
Right.
93, moved down to Patrickswell. Father built the house, just himself. And
on your uncle's land, was it?
On Uncle Tom's land, yeah.
And there was great characters around the well at those times, the Generys and all those.
And yeah, I was small at the time, but yeah.
Can you remember those characters and what they'd be up to?
Not really. I was very young at the time, and I suppose then when I finished school, I joined the Guards and I went to Dublin, so I wasn't around as much as I would have liked to be. And yeah, of course, different times now, but the old families were there, and
And of course, your mother then, she lived into a great age.
She did. She passed away last January, 12 months. She did, and it's just a connection with Roisin, her grandmother, a Sarah Punch. And just while I think of it, there was 4 Pat Punches living in the area, and they were all first cousins. And it was just to differentiate between the Pat Punches. They all had nicknames. So you had Pat the Bog, Pat the Middle, Pat the Gate, and Pat the Lake. Pat the Bog lived in Roisin. He was my mother's great-grandfather. Pat the Middle lived where Tommy Carr lived. Pat the Gate lived where George Finch, where the Finches are now. And Pat the Lake lived where John Hunt used to live. And there was a 5th Pat Punch, but I don't think he was a relation. Now, maybe he was a distant relation or a connection to the 4, but it's gone so far back, there's no record, but there was a 5th Pat Punch. And he was living...
They had to have nicknames to tell them apart, great names, weren't they?
That's it. There sure was.
And I suppose then, when you came to Patrickswell, Lough Gur, and these stories of fairies and all would be being told at the time, and there's a fort in the passage from you. Would you be told to stay away from them, or was there anything ever about it?
Well, I was never told, but always knew. Just had a fit, just leave well enough alone. And of course, there's one in at the end of the Boreen on the left, in at Dooley's, and then further across the fields from just going in the passage, there's a second fairy fort as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. No.
So there's 2 of them. Now, they say that from any fairy fort, you're able to see another 2. There's always 3 line of sight. So if there's a 3rd, I don't know, but there's 2 in the vicinity.
Back in them times, people wouldn't interfere with them. They wouldn't even cut timber out of them or anything.
No, certainly not. My father actually told the story, and it was maybe 2001 or 2002. He was at home one evening, it was a couple of days before Halloween, and he was out in the Boreen. And basically, he heard what he described as some sort of a wind instrument. Now, it wasn't a tin whistle or a clarinet, but definitely a wind instrument playing high-pitched individual notes. Now, he said it wasn't an animal or a fox. This was something completely different, but playing very fast, like a polka, or a high tempo individual notes. And he heard this for a couple of seconds, and there was nothing in the field. And next thing he heard, what he thought was a group of horses running up the field. And when they got close to him, just the noise stopped. And like anything, he wouldn't say anything on a whim, or he'd be fairly sure before he'd say something anyway, a story like that. But it wasn't a tin whistle, but it was something, definitely a wind instrument, but unlike anything he had ever heard. And of course, I was asking him, was it a clarinet? What did it sound like? He couldn't describe it, but it was just high pitched individual notes, separate.
Did you think it was the banshee?
Not sure. No, there is folklore that in around the time of Halloween, fairies will move from one fairy fort to another, like moving house, for the next year. But it's Halloween is the time they've moved. Now that's the folklore of it. So maybe something to do with it.
And you mentioned that the fort was on Dooley's field, and of course we have Patrick Dooley, a victim in 1912 of the Titanic. Do you know anything about him and his story?
Well, I know he emigrated to Chicago in either 1907 or 1908, and he came back to Patrickswell because his father was ill. And of course, his father passed away, and he was returning then to Chicago, and he was to travel on another ship, but he missed the voyage, and of course then he got his ticket to go on the Titanic, and we all know what happened with that. He died in that tragedy, and basically he has this descendants in the area ever since. I know that he sent a postcard from Cove just before boarding the Titanic, and that went for auction in Sotheby's years ago. But that's basically it. I think he was very successful. He was a sportsman over in Chicago. Exactly what sports, I don't know, but very successful. Yeah.
And it's sad to think that someone from the area perished in the Titanic.
And the twist of fate too.
Yeah.
Just unlucky.
Unlucky, yeah. So there was a lot of lives changed by that. It was a great tragedy at the time, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
But just to think that there was someone on the Titanic from such a small area.
From such a small area that has a small area like Patrickswell, Knockdark, has a link to the Titanic. The tragedy, yeah.
So, Claude, it was lovely chatting with you.
Thanks very much, John.
Yeah, and it was...
Just before you wrap up, John, I might ask a couple of quick questions, if that's all right. Is that all right? Just to follow up. Very nice, very interesting. Yeah. You mentioned you grew up in Bruff. Did you? So were you did you grow up in the town then, and before you came here, or were you?
Grew up in the town, Newtown Terrace. So when you're driving into Bruff from Limerick, it's that there's a terrace of houses on the right hand side. It'd be opposite where Wallace's Pharmacy is now. Two-story house. So.
And how was it then coming to, I suppose, a more rural area? It's all relative, but did it feel different? Do you remember as a child any difference coming here?
I do, and I couldn't picture myself moving out of Bruff, out of the town, and I was unsure would I like it, the country life basically. But literally after 2 weeks after moving down to Patrickswell, I wouldn't go back to Bruff or swap it for anything. So.
And did you swap school and all then?
No.
So you stayed going to school in Bruff?
Stayed going to school in Bruff, John.
And secondary, you probably went to hospital, did you?
No, secondary in Bruff, the FCJ.
It was still going?
Yeah, it was moved down and still going to school in Bruff. It's only 4 miles away, so yeah.
So you would have kept your friends and all then?
Absolutely, yeah.
Which was a great help.
And the final one, you mentioned how your father would have worked for John Hunt there, and he sounded like he worked at whatever was available kind of in the area as well, with the quarry. Yeah. Did he ever mention, how did he view being, working, say, with on the archaeological side of things? And he worked quite a long time by the sounds of it. How did he view it? Did he see that he was doing kind of valuable work in unearthing, the past of Lough Gur, or did he see it as a job, or do you know how he kind of looked at it?
It was certainly unique. Like anything, number one, to get a job. and it was local as well, but certainly from John Hunt then, and John Hunt obviously being the archaeologist, and would have learnt a lot more about the area, of course. So he kind of saw it, Daniel, as a bit of everything, you know, but yeah.
Of course, jobs are very scarce, and to get a good job like that.
That's it.
Yeah. It was said that when the archaeologists came here to Lough Gur, it was like Adele coming to Lough Gur.
That's it, you see. And of course, it wasn't like the way it is now, all developed. It wasn't. So, yeah, the area got developed then, of course. But different times, and it was a different place altogether back then.
And did you ever, you mentioned he discovered a couple of axes, I think, was it? Did you ever go into the Hunt Museum and see them, or did you get to see them as kids or when you were young?
No, actually I didn't. No, my father was in there the opening night of it. He was invited in. So he was in there a number of times, all right. There was a BBC programme as well, made in the 1960s. And basically it was showing there was a prehistoric house, but my father and a Michael Houlihan from Knockany built it, and whatever way they were dressed up, they were playing the part of Stone Age men, and of course they had the artefacts as if they were working, cutting timber and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's interesting to hear that, because was it Mike Whelan spoke about the houses on Lough Gur, and we didn't actually know that. I didn't know that, and so there's another connection with it, that your father actually helped to build them and were the props there when the filming was going on.
There's a photograph of at home, actually, the two of them doing it. I haven't seen the programme itself, but there's certainly photographs at home, the two of them.
I looked it up actually when Mike Whelan mentioned it. I couldn't find it online now for any kind of archive of it, but yeah, has anyone in your family seen that piece or the film?
I certainly haven't. I don't know, Daniel. I don't know. Certainly have photographs from it, but the actual TV programme itself, I don't know.
So have you photographs of the hut?
Of the huts, and my father and a Michael Houlihan from Knockany.
It would be very interesting to get one of those photos developed and have it framed and have it here in the centre. I think it would be very important even.
That's it for me, unless there's any final bits, John, or anything you wanted to add.
No, I can't think of anything, Daniel. You've touched on all the points, John. It's just my father, Roisin and Patrick Swell, was his life really. Apart from working in Roadstone and Bunratty, everything was in the locality.
Down to the church every Sunday morning. And did he play the handball and play the cards?
He played the cards, and I remember when I was small, of course, there was dozens of people after Mass on a Sunday into the clubhouse. It's the Honey Fits now, but into the clubhouse playing 45. And sure
that continued for something around 24 or 5 years.
It's longer than that,
You think so,
John, because my father was young when it started. I think it could be 50 years even. Yeah. It's longer than 25, but of course as time went by then, the numbers went down, and there was 4 left who used to play cards on a Sunday, and of course 3 died, including my father, in a short space of time. So that was it.
4 left. What probably was your father, Mikey Hogan, Pat Mulcahy.
That's right.
And who was the 4th one?
Mikey Hogan, Pat Mulcahy, Jack Carroll, and it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, it won't come to you now anyway.
It won't come to me now. But
so, Claude, thank you very much for coming and joining us. It was lovely chatting with you. And thanks to Daniel for having us and for recording the interview.
Always a pleasure. And thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.